Listeners of SoundCloud, I'm your host, Icy, and welcome back for another audio blog over at soundcloud.com/IcyVolk. Today we're back again to discuss the Nintendo Switch, the next big home console by the famed Japanese company Nintendo, which is most known for games like Mario, Legend of Zelda, the Metroid series, Super Smash, Donkey Kong, some of the best games in the industry. And they're finally introducing the first ever hybrid console in the world of gaming. The Nintendo Switch, which will be the cross-console that will provide console and handheld gaming. It's a first. It's finally being done. You'll finally be able to play it from your toilet. Amazing. Phenomenal. I can't wait. I am definitely looking forward to purchasing the Nintendo Switch, especially since I've never actually owned a Nintendo home console. While I do have experience playing on all of the Nintendo home consoles, especially like the Wii and the Wii U, I've never actually owned one. And so I can't wait to buy the Nintendo Switch and break that tradition of not ever owning a home console by Nintendo. I can't wait to play from my bed, from the toilet, from the goddamn kitchen, and on the big screen as well. So the Nintendo Switch will actually be releasing on March 3rd of 2017, in about a month from now. We're finally getting the next Nintendo home console gen, and it's going to be sold for $300, which is $100 cheaper than the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were back on the release days. So I personally believe that $300 for the Nintendo Switch is a reasonable price. While it could have been a little bit cheaper, I think the Nintendo Switch is worth the money. It's an innovative piece of gear. It's a cross between console and handheld. And on top of that, it will also provide touchscreen motion control with the controllers. And there is no region locking. The developers at Nintendo are finally removing region locking on their games, which means that consumers of Nintendo will be able to play Japanese games or games that they're purchasing from the European side and play it in the West without any region locking. So if you want to buy, let's say, a Japanese game that is going to take a year and a half to localize in North America, then you can play it. You can purchase it from Japan and play it on your console, but it will probably not have the English language available on there. But you can still play it on your console without having to wait for the localized North American version. So that's another big advantage of the Nintendo Switch. However, the Nintendo Switch's game launch is going to be pretty weak. We're only getting one AAA title by Nintendo on March 3rd. The Nintendo Switch is actually going to be launching with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the next installment in the popular Legend of Zelda series. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is supposedly as big, if not bigger than, let's say, the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, which is a pretty massive open world RPG. And Legend of Zelda is a well-beloved game by Nintendo fans. The last game we got was, Skyward Sword, and that game was not so good by many, according to many Legend of Zelda fans, but it looks like Breath of the Wild will be a promising title, and it looks like it'll feature endless content, lots of replayability. But before I go on a tangent about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, let's actually go over the Nintendo Switch's specifications and what the Nintendo Switch box includes and what the games are going to be on launch. And we'll talk as well about the additional accessories that'll be sold separately. So, first of all, motion control will be available with the Joy-Con controllers, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. There's going to be a touchscreen included within the Nintendo Switch itself. It is usually expected that most tablets and smartphone devices have touchscreen included, so it's an industry standard to have the latest pieces of technology with the screen have touchscreen capability. So it's good to hear that the Nintendo Switch will have a touchscreen included. Unfortunately, we're not getting any video apps, so there won't be any Netflix or Twitch or any other video services coming out on launch. They will eventually launch those in the next months following the release day. but we won't have video apps right off the bat. We won't even have demos for games. So it's going to be a pretty weak launch when it comes to games. We're only getting The Legend of Zelda as the only AAA title on release day. We're also getting a bunch of other games like Skylanders Imaginators, which was already released over on the PlayStation 4. We're getting Just Dance 2017, Super Bomberman. There's a new Super Bomberman called R coming out on the Nintendo Switch. And the first motion control game that we're getting on release day for the Nintendo Switch is called 1-2 Switch. It is going to be a game that'll have many different motion control mini games included. It'll be pretty much a party game that you'll play with friends. It's not so much meant for hardcore gamers, but Legend of Zelda is pretty much the only game that is going to be ultimately the system seller for the Nintendo Switch. Otherwise, if Legend of Zelda wasn't releasing on the same day, then I think most people wouldn't even think about purchasing the Nintendo Switch. Now, my personal recommendation for people that want to buy this console, if you already own a Wii U, don't buy the Nintendo Switch. Wait a couple months. Wait until Super Mario Odyssey comes out or some of the other AAA games planned for 2017 or 2018. Wait for those games first and then consider buying the Nintendo Switch, because Legend of Zelda is actually going to be released for the Wii U as well on the same day. And the graphical differences between the Legend of Zelda Nintendo Switch and Wii U version are very minimal. We'll actually go over them in a moment, but let's talk about the features of the Nintendo Switch. Now, before we actually talk about the system details, let's actually go over what the Nintendo Switch box includes. First of all, we get a set of Joy-Con controllers. The Joy-Con controllers are very casual. They're not exactly designed for professional or hardcore gamers. They're pretty intuitive controllers. You actually use them for the motion control capabilities of the console. So they have an L and R button, and you can actually, the really cool thing about the Nintendo Switch is that the controllers called the Joy-Con, the left and right Joy-Cons, are actually detachable. You can set them onto the Nintendo Switch and play it as if you were playing a giant 3DS. But you can also remove the Joy-Con controllers from the Nintendo Switch console itself and play it from a distance. So they're also motion controllers at the same time. And they have two new buttons on the Joy-Con controllers as well, a screenshot and a video capture button on there for screenshots and recording capabilities. So apart from the set of Joy-Con controllers, you also get a Joy-Con grip. So if you want to use the Joy-Con controllers as if you were playing on a traditional controller, then you can set those onto the Joy-Con grip, which will have a grip underneath the Joy-Cons. So it'll be a little bit more comfortable to utilize the controls if you actually place the Joy-Cons onto the grip. Unfortunately, though, the Joy-Con grip is not chargeable. The one that is included in the Nintendo Switch box is actually not chargeable. So you'll have to actually purchase a separate accessory if you want to actually play a chargeable wireless Joy-Con on a Joy-Con grip that is chargeable. Then you'll have to pay $30 for that one. Otherwise, the one that comes in the box is non-chargeable. So you'll have to always have the Joy-Con grip connected to your Nintendo Switch, unfortunately. The Nintendo Switch box also includes two wrist straps, which you can use to, the Joy-Con controllers are already as small as it is. So having the Joy-Con straps is really helpful, especially if you're planning on playing the Nintendo Switch from your school, if you want to go to the park and play with your friends out there. If you're not playing the Nintendo Switch at home, then basically you'll want to have the Joy-Con straps with you. They actually include improved L and R buttons, which are a little bigger than the default L and R buttons on the Joy-Cons themselves. And you also get the AC adapter, the HDMI cord, and a USB Type-C cord for connecting your controller to the main station. So, like I've said before, the really cool thing about the Nintendo Switch is you can actually play it from a distance. You can undock it from the Nintendo Switch station. So essentially, you can set it up on a table. There's even like a kickstand on the back of the Nintendo Switch tablet. So you can place it on your kitchen table, play it from a distance with your Joy-Con controllers. You can also play with up to 8 total player. If you're playing a multiplayer game, essentially, you can have 2 Nintendo Switch consoles and play with 8 people in total, which is really cool. You can set it up so you can have like a fun party. I imagine that the Nintendo Switch will be really fun in settings like parties and clubs, gaming clubs specifically. But it's again, I personally do not see myself playing the Nintendo Switch on the go. If I play it on the go, then I'll play it by myself. I'm not really going to be playing with other people. Maybe Mario Kart. Nintendo is actually planning on re-releasing Mario Kart 7 on to the Nintendo Switch, and they're actually adding new content to it. So this Mario Kart 7 edition is called Deluxe, and it'll actually feature Splatoon characters as well as the battle mode, which was actually introduced back in Mario Kart 64, I believe, which was the original game. So a good portion of Mario Kart fans are looking forward to playing the battle mode again. So yeah, apart from there's new characters, a couple of new characters, and new, like 2 or 3 new maps, I assume. And hopefully they'll add more and more stuff onto the deluxe version for the Nintendo Switch. I actually really want to play Mario Kart over on the Nintendo Switch. It seems like it'll be a fun time, especially since, again, you can play the Nintendo Switch on the go. It's also a handheld device and a home console device at the same time. So really, that is the main draw for this brand new Nintendo console. And I seriously think that the Nintendo Switch will sell really, really well on the day of launch. It will have a decline in sales at some point before most of the good games release eventually later down the line. Because again, like I've said before, the game launch is really weak. There is no video apps. And some of the other disadvantages of the Nintendo Switch is that you actually have to pay for the online service, meaning that if you want to play multiplayer, you will actually have to pay monthly for it. So let's talk about that real quick. So Nintendo is actually going to be charging consumers of the Nintendo Switch for the multiplayer capabilities. So the paid service will actually launch in fall of 2017, and early fall of 2017 is actually when they're going to be charging consumers for it. But they're going to have a free trial period starting off in March. So from the day of the release, the developers at Nintendo are going to let consumers try out the multiplayer, the online service that is, until early fall and see whether people are satisfied with it or not. So the online NX service will allow players to get access to allow them access to multiplayer online. And along with that, consumers will have to download a smartphone app, a dedicated smartphone app for the Nintendo Switch. It'll actually let them invite their friends to play online. You can set play appointments, quote unquote, whatever that means. You can also chat with your friends from your smartphone app during online matches for compatible games. I personally think that it complicates things having a smartphone dedicated for multiplayer online access. It's a bit redundant. I seriously do not understand why they couldn't include the chatting capability, the chatting interaction, or the list of friends. Why couldn't they actually put all that stuff into the Nintendo Switch is beyond me. Why have it separately on a smartphone device? I think it's going to be really complicated and a little bit infuriating, but we'll just have to see it in action. Again, at the end of the day, we'll make a final verdict when we actually get to use this smartphone app that they've promised. And so the online service for the Nintendo Switch will also include a monthly game download. So people who are subscribed to the NX online service, which will be free from March until early fall, will offer a monthly game download. So people will be able to play an NES or Super NES game for free. Now, the really shitty part about this, though, is that they actually take the games back after a month. So while they do offer a free NES or SNES game for free, they take it back from you after a month of usage. After a month of subscription, that NES or SNES game that you get for free disappears off of your library, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. Honestly, it's like any NES and SNES games are games that you can play on your goddamn computer. They're ROM games. Why? Why take them from consumers' pockets when you can actually... Those games, like SNES and NES games, are old-ass games. They're 20-year-old games on average that you can just easily download on an emulator on your computer, and to have them limited for a month is ridiculous. It's absurd, and it just shows that Nintendo is a little bit on the greedy side when it comes to marketing their products and whatnot. So I'm a little bit disheartened by the fact that they're allowing us to play an NES or SNES game for free of our choice, and then they just take it back after a month. I don't understand it, and I would have really preferred if they would allow you to have the game permanently in your library. Then yeah, maybe I would appreciate it a little bit more. But it's a little bit greedy, and it's just kind of a shit move on Nintendo's part. But apart from the NES, SNES monthly game download promotion, subscribers of the NX online service will also get access to exclusive game deals, kind of like what PlayStation Plus does and the Xbox Gold subscription do. They're going to do a similar thing for their Nintendo games. So that is pretty much the gist of the NX online service. It's going to be free from March. It's for a certain period of time, and then it'll be a paid service in early of fall 2017. But apart from the NX online service, what else do we got? The system details. Let's go over quickly the system details of the Nintendo Switch. So the battery life for the portability capabilities of the Nintendo Switch is between 2.5 and 6 hours. This really kind of shocked me that there is a huge disparity in the battery life. Like from 2.5 to 6 hours is a huge difference. I'm pretty sure that my Nintendo 3DS can last for maybe 8 hours, 6 hours if I keep playing it for 6 straight hours. But it's kind of disappointing to hear that the Nintendo Switch is not going to last as long as the Nintendo 3DS. I mean, you would expect that a piece of gaming portable gear that is bigger than the 3DS would function for a longer period of time, but that does not seem like the case. So the developers have reported that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is going to be playable for about 3 hours of game time if you play it portably. So if you want to play Legend of Zelda, I don't know, in the plane, on a plane trip, or you're taking a train trip or whatever, you can play Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for about roughly 3 hours until the portable device dies, until the battery life runs out, essentially. So, I mean, 3 hours is a reasonable amount of time. But again, if you're going to make this cross console be popular for its portability capabilities, you might want to increase the battery life on the actual piece of gaming gear, but to hear that it's only going to last about 3 hours on a AAA game is a little disappointing. But then again, this is Nintendo trying to innovate. They want to take a fresh new start on their development, because unfortunately the Wii U, the last generation of Nintendo home consoles, did not sell very well. While the Wii U sold about 976 million units on average, though the Wii U in comparison did not sell as it sold miserably. The Wii U was never as popular, and it actually was a step down from the potential of Nintendo's gaming consoles. From the Wii U was a big thing back then because it actually provided motion control, which was a brand new feature in home consoles, right? But then the Wii U was pretty much like a slightly upgraded version of the same last console. But the main reason why the Wii U never sold as well is because of its line of games. There were not many AAA titles to be released for the Wii U over its lifetime. And unfortunately, because of that might also affect the sales of the Nintendo Switch, because people got a bad impression off of the Wii U sales. Many returning Nintendo fans might actually skip the Nintendo Switch until later down the line. Like I've said before, the game launch for the Nintendo Switch seems to be pretty weak. And hopefully Nintendo steps it up by introducing new third-party developers into their line of games. And that's what they're actually doing. Nintendo finally is partnering with many third-party companies to bring in other titles, like they're actually going to bring the Elder Scrolls Skyrim into the Nintendo Switch. That is something that actually floored a lot of people. And so there's going to be Ubisoft games on the Nintendo Switch, many games like Dark Souls. Hopefully, Nintendo really is trying their best to collaborate with other gaming companies and to bring in that wave of popularity again, because their Wii U, the last generation of Nintendo home consoles, was pretty terrible. Apart from Super Smash Bros. And Xenoblade or Xenoverse, whatever that was called, and the Legend of Zelda game, there weren't a whole lot of games coming out for the Wii U. And so hopefully the Nintendo Switch will turn around the game and bring in Nintendo back onto the same level as PlayStation and Microsoft are, because right now the Nintendo consoles seem like the buddy console. They're not, they aren't really competitive enough. They're not making consumers go, oh, hey, I'm going to go buy a Nintendo console over a PlayStation or Xbox One, right? The Nintendo is always the secondary console. It's there, but it's not also being used all that much. While most people play on the PlayStation and the Xbox, the Nintendo consoles are just there for when you're having a bunch of people over and you want to play Super Smash, or if you like your traditional popular Nintendo games, then yes, you'll occasionally play the Nintendo console, but at the end of the day, most games are also coming out for PlayStation and Xbox. Nintendo is not known for having a lot of third-party developers be included in their consoles, and they're actually they're finally making a change and doing the complete opposite. They're finally going to have indie titles on the Nintendo Switch, and as well as AAA Western games onto the damn platform. They're going to have Elder Scrolls, Skyrim. They're going to have I think they're going to have Dark Souls in there as well, but they're also going to they're actually bringing The Binding of Isaac into the Nintendo Switch on launch day. So apparently The Binding of Isaac Afterbirth Plus is actually releasing on the same day of the console's launch. And eventually down the line, we're also getting I Am Setsuna, which is a recent game published by Square Enix and developed by one of their new team of developers called Tokyo RPG Factory. So they're going to have I Am Setsuna on the Nintendo Switch. Concerned Ape, the developer of Stardew Valley, is actually going to be releasing his game onto the Nintendo Switch as well, so that's great news. Some other indie games that we're getting, let me look at this list real quick. We're also getting Shovel Knight on there. Shovel Knight is another great game that we got recently on PC. It's a side-scrolling action-adventure game. It's got so much content to it, and I think it'll do exceedingly well on the Nintendo Switch. What other indie games are going over to the Nintendo Switch? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm looking at a list here, and there's a bunch of games eventually coming out for the Nintendo Switch. So hopefully, as the Nintendo Switch gets more and more games, hopefully it'll have more and more sales, because I personally really want the Nintendo Switch to succeed. Although I'm not happy about the release date and what they have to offer so far for the console, I think Nintendo really wants to provide good games, but they constantly make terrible decisions, design decisions and marketing decisions. They just are not good. They don't understand what people want. They always go for what's going to make the most money out of their pocket. And yes, I understand that they want to make money after having terrible sales on the Wii U. I can understand their standpoint when it comes to how they want to sell their accessories and the games, and with the online paid service. It's hard to say whether or not Nintendo should change the prices on their console and maybe introduce some new games on there. They have to sacrifice certain things to allow a better budget to come in their hands. You have to think it in a perspective of a businessman, right? If you were a developer, how would you think of making more money? But then you also have to think about the consumers and what they really like about Nintendo. You have to remind yourself, what do consumers truly want from Nintendo? And I think the Nintendo developers right now are trying to make compromises, but they're also trying to include what people really want to see on a Nintendo console. It's really hard to say, but I seriously want the Nintendo Switch to succeed. It's just, I'm not cheering for its demise or anything. I'm a little bit disappointed with the launch day and the online service so far. Also, we actually didn't mention the Nintendo accessories, so let's quickly mention the Nintendo Switch accessories. So, like I've said before, the Joy-Con grip that you get with the Nintendo Switch box does not include a Joy-Con grip that is chargeable, so you'll have to actually purchase one, a charging Joy-Con grip for $30. Some of the other additional accessories that people can buy for the Nintendo Switch are, of course, the extra Joy-Con controller sets, which are ridiculously pricey. So if you ever want to get another set of Joy-Con L and R, you have to pay 80 goddamn US dollars, which is just way beyond what I can afford. If you want to buy an individual Joy-Con controller, the L or R, it'll be $50 each. So obviously, I mean, the $80 set is a way better deal than the individual one. You can also get a Joy-Con wheel for games like Mario Kart that have racing gameplay included. And you can also get an extra Nintendo Switch dock set for about $90. So if you live in a big house, if you live in a goddamn mansion and you have multiple TVs and you want to dock your Nintendo Switch at many different stations, you can buy another one for $90. Again, very expensive. And finally, the Nintendo developers have actually designed a Pro controller. So they actually created a controller specifically made for gamers that have a lot of experience with gaming and that prefer comfortable controls and maneuverability. So They have a Pro Controller to offer, and it's not included in the Nintendo Switch box. It's going to be sold for $70 US dollars each. Again, very absurd price. The price points for the accessories is absolutely insane, and it just seems like Nintendo wants to make more money on top. I think they really designed the Joy-Con controllers to be as mainstream as possible to force the hardcore gamers, the good portion of hardcore gamers, to buy additional accessories. Because, again, the Nintendo Switch is going to be sold at $300, but if you add up the extra Joy-Con sets and the Joy-Con and the Pro Controller and the charging Joy-Con grip, which, I mean, if I'm going to be getting a Nintendo Switch, I would probably buy the charging Joy-Con grip, because I like to play wirelessly. It's kind of a hassle if you're playing with a cord, especially if you're playing on the big screen. I personally like to play comfortably and wirelessly while laying on the couch. I don't want to have a cord attached to my Joy-Con grip, right? So I'll most likely I'll most likely purchase the Joy-Con grip. But as far as the Pro Controller is something that I really want, that I personally really want, but I cannot understand the $70 price point. It is not worth that much money to pay for. So, I mean, the Joy-Con grip, I think, does its job, but what I've seen so far with the Joy-Con is it looks really small. The controllers themselves, the L&R Joy-Cons look relatively small, and they're about the size of a human's the human palm. So I would ideally like to have a Pro Controller, but I cannot I cannot justify paying $70 for a Pro Controller. So maybe if they have discounts during the holidays or during, I don't know, a special summer day event, then I'll consider buying the Pro Controller. But I cannot, like I've said before, I can't justify paying that much money for a dedicated gaming controller. I can't. I don't have disposable income to throw around, so I might just have to wait a while before I snag myself a Pro Controller. So, and then let's actually mention the system details. Like I've said before, the battery life is pretty short, between 2.5 and 6 hours. The internal memory of the actual Nintendo Switch is of 32 gigabytes. So there's 32 gigs of storage. Fortunately, it can be expanded with micro SDHC and SDXC cards. So you can actually buy micro cards off of online retailers and place those cards into the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo Switch will have a slot available for extra micro cards. So you can always add 250 gigs of internal storage in there. So don't worry about having limited storage in there. Yes, while there is very little storage available on the Nintendo Switch, you can always include more with micro cards, which are very reliable. Surprisingly enough, these Chinese micro cards are actually pretty solid. So don't worry about getting screwed over and having a faulty micro card off of Amazon or eBay. I can understand, while I am disappointed with the battery life and the internal size of the internal memory size of the Nintendo Switch, I can understand why it has such low specifications, especially since the Nintendo Switch console pretty much is it's a handheld device, right? It's kind of like a tablet, but it's also a dedicated gaming device. So they had to sacrifice performance for the console design and portability, and I can understand that from a business standpoint. It makes sense. The screen size of the actual Nintendo Switch is of 6.2 inches. It's got included touchscreen. The display resolution is of 1280 by 720p, which is, I believe, much higher than what the Nintendo 3DS has to offer. Again, games on the played on the Nintendo Switch will play at 30 FPS for games like Legend of Zelda. As far as indie games go, indie games that are 2D or retro pixelated, I think those will possibly play at 60 FPS. No promises there, but I think indie games will perform way better. And then when it comes to highly graphical games like Mario Kart or Super Bomberman, those will probably run at 30 FPS at most. Maybe a little bit less at certain points throughout those games. No video apps on launch. Like I've said before, there's no Hulu or Netflix or Twitch on there. So maybe later down the line they'll include those, but for now, those are not going to be available for download, especially since, I mean, the internal memory of the damn thing is 32 gigs already, so I can understand why they're not releasing video apps right off the bat, especially when they want to make sure that people have enough space to download their current games. It makes sense, and I think maybe way later down the line they'll have the video apps, but for now there's none of that. And then the user design, the user interface design for the actual Nintendo Switch looks pretty minimalistic from the images that I've seen on Twitter. It looks damn intuitive. So apart from the launch games that I've mentioned before, Legend of Zelda, 1-2 Switch, Super Bomberman, Just Dance, Skylanders, Imaginators, and Binding of Isaac, we're also getting Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on April 28th. Brand new characters, a battle mode, and then we're getting another motion control game later in spring. It's actually a fighting game titled ARMS. So it's a punching game that includes characters that have extendable arms. A little bit weirded out by the fact that this game is actually called ARMS. Not a very creative named game title for a fighting game. ARMS. I mean, you might as well have called it Punches or Fists, but they had to go with ARMS. And honestly, I kind of like what I've seen so far from that game. This motion control fighting game, ARMS. It looks pretty fun, and I've seen multiple YouTubers play the game over at the New York press conference. It looked like it had a lot of mechanics. I mean, we got the video trailer during the actual press conference, but that was not enough to get a good idea of what the game mechanics were going to look like. But after I saw most of the YouTubers who went there showcase the game on their YouTube channels, it looked pretty, the game looked pretty deep in terms of fighting mechanics. There's health bars and there's combinations to perform. There's special abilities. There's different characters to play. So it looks like ARMS will be a solid motion control game in comparison to 1-2 Switch, which is more of a party game, essentially. I think ARMS will be the very first fun motion control game that'll attract a lot of hardcore gamers, especially gamers that enjoy fighting and competitive games. ARMS, I think, will have a good fan base. In summer of 2017, we're getting the Splatoon sequel, Splatoon 2, which is going to have pretty much of the same gameplay mechanics that the first game had, but it'll have new features in there as well. New guns and special attacks and all that good stuff. And of course, we're getting new maps and I guess new characters. I've never played Splatoon, so I don't really know what it's about. All I know is that it's a cartoonized first-person online game. Well, not first-person, but third-person shooting. I couldn't tell you. Honestly, I've never played Splatoon, and I haven't looked at it much. But it looks like a fun game, and it actually has a solid player base. So, Splatoon 2, look forward to that in summer 2017. In autumn, in fall of 2017, we're getting The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. So the 5-year-old Bethesda game is actually going to be released over on the Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately, though, it's going to be sold for about $60, which is, the standard price for AAA games that release on the release day. But I cannot fathom, I can't understand why would you put a $60 price point on a 5-year-old game? Skyrim was a game that I originally played when I was still in my college years. And to hear that an old game like Skyrim would be getting a $60 price point on the Nintendo Switch is a bit ridiculous. But again, I can understand the price point. It's, as far as business goes, I think the $60 is going to be distributed fairly amongst the Nintendo developers and the Bethesda ones as well. So you have to also understand that the money goes to all kinds of people in the industry. It's not just going to Nintendo at the end of the day. It's also, part of it is also being distributed to Bethesda. And so that well-earned money is going to help them, Nintendo and Bethesda, develop hopefully more and better games. And then in holiday of 2017, we're also getting Super Mario Odyssey. The next big Mario game is going to be coming out in hopefully early holiday season. It looked pretty damn open world. It kind of reminded me of Super Mario Galaxy in terms of the game's scale and the environment. But it also, the first portion of the video trailer that they showed us of Super Mario Odyssey actually took place in the real world. Mario looked like he was running around in Manhattan, and a lot of people were actually saying that that specific part of Super Mario Odyssey reminded them of a Sonic game. I can't remember the specific subtitle of the Sonic game, but a lot of people were reminded of that. So Super Mario Odyssey actually looks very good. From what I've seen, there is a lot to do. There's so much space to run around, and there's new mechanics in there. In particular, the Mario hat that you can jump onto. You use it as a additional platform to get through certain places. So that's nifty. So I'm definitely looking forward to Super Mario Odyssey. It looks like a very solid Mario game, and it's too bad that it's only releasing in holiday. It's only going to be releasing next winter, so that's still a long way from now. And again, like I've said before, the week launch lineup of games for Nintendo Switch is a bit disheartening. Hopefully the Nintendo Switch will succeed later down the line, but it's going to take quite a bit of time before it can compete with PlayStation and Microsoft at the same level. So let's talk about The Legend of Zelda real quick. So Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, like I've said before, is releasing on March 3rd, and is also going to be releasing on the same day for the Wii U. So it'll actually be the last game to be developed for the Wii U, but it'll also be the first AAA game to release on to the Nintendo Switch. Now, people have been worrying whether or not the Legend of Zelda Wii U version would be a lot worse than the Nintendo Switch, but it looks like the differences between the two are very minimal. So both are launching on the same day, and the developers have reported that the Legend of Zelda Wii U and Nintendo Switch will run at the same amount of frame rate, so 30 FPS on the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch. It'll have the same, both versions will feature the same content, though, so they're not doing any DLCs specific for the Nintendo Switch or any exclusive bullshit for one console or the other, so they're going to have the same content. Now, as far as the TV output goes, if you play the Nintendo Switch on the TV, the Nintendo Switch will actually render the game at 900p resolution, while the Wii U renders it at 720p. So there is a bit of a graphical difference, but it shouldn't ruin your game experience and your immersion that much. Resolution isn't that big of a deal, especially if it's a 180, what is it? 100. It's a 180p resolution difference, so it's not that big of a disparity, right? So that's something that you can overlook. Also, the higher quality environmental sounds on the Nintendo Switch are more enhanced, right? So the developers have actually made it so that the sound design for the Nintendo Switch Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild version is a little bit more immersive. The sounds are more authentic on the Nintendo Switch, reportedly. So there's a bit of a sound difference there. Now, for the physical copy of the Wii U, consumers of Wii U will have to actually download 3 gigabytes of memory in order to play the game on the console, if they get the physical copy, that is. But, I mean, that's not a big deal, especially since the Wii U has quite a bit of internal storage in comparison to the Nintendo Switch, which only has 32 gigs. Now, here's the only bad part about this. The only main difference is the fact that they're not actually going to be offering special editions of Breath of the Wild for the Wii U. So the pre-orders that they've created for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild for Collector's and Master's Edition, whatever those are called, they're actually not going to have those available for Wii U consumers. That's the only downside as far as differences go between the Wii U and Nintendo Switch Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild versions go, sorry. And then finally, a few icons, such as the on-screen buttons differ between the two versions, but it shouldn't affect much of the gameplay. It shouldn't really ruin the main setup of the game itself. Like I've said before, if you already own a Wii U, you can just get yourself Legend of Zelda on there. Don't buy the Nintendo Switch just for the sake of playing Breath of the Wild on it. I'm actually buying the Nintendo Switch because I don't currently own a home console by Nintendo, so I have a good solid reason to get the new console. But if you already own the Wii U, just forget about the Nintendo Switch. Wait until some more good games come out down the line. Wait until at least Super Mario Odyssey, or I want to say Xenoverse. What I can't remember what the other games were announced at the press conference, but just don't buy it right off the bat. I mean, if you really have the money, go ahead and support Nintendo and buy it. But if you're on a budget, I would totally skip the Nintendo Switch and wait until more AAA games get on there, and just wait maybe for a discount. Wait until the holidays. Usually consoles get discounted at that period of the year, so I think it's a good plan to have. I mean, especially if you have the Wii U, don't make stupid decisions and just impulse purchase the Nintendo Switch. So I'm definitely, like I've said before, I'm ecstatic for the Nintendo Switch. It's refreshing. It's a new take on console gaming, and from the videos that I've seen on YouTube, people have said that the screen on the Nintendo Switch console is very vibrant. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing the Nintendo Switch from my bed or from the couch. And I usually do all of my gaming on my computer most of the time, but I also do occasionally play on console. And to hear that the Nintendo Switch has so many capabilities like motion control, touchscreen, and handheld gaming, I think the fact that the Nintendo Switch is versatile in terms of its potential and its features, I think that's going to attract a lot of new consumers, not necessarily returning Nintendo fans, but a lot of people who are just diving into the Nintendo Switch. I think are going to be happy to hear that the Nintendo Switch allows them to play the Nintendo Switch on the go, or play it with other people, and to be able to share the Joy-Con controller is also good news, because apparently I actually didn't mention this before, but the set of Joy-Con controllers, the L and R, can also be used as separate controllers. That's something that I didn't mention before, but it's worthy of pointing out. So you can actually utilize the set of Joy-Con controllers as separate controllers. It will be a little bit uncomfortable to play them separately, but nevertheless, it's still something worth pointing out, because again, I think the Nintendo Switch's main strength is its versatility, hence the name the Nintendo Switch. You can play it from your big screen, you can play it on the go, you can share the Joy-Con controllers, share the fun, as they say, sharing the fun, giggity. And, also the fact that it's only $300, it's going to be it's got a reasonable price point, but it's a bit unfortunate that the potential of this console is held back by the ridiculous accessory prices and the paid multiplayer access. What is it? What else? The launch games, the lineup for the lineup of games coming out for the Nintendo Switch is really disappointing. Like the only system seller out of all those games is Legend of Zelda. If Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was not releasing on the same day of the Nintendo Switch, I would have most likely skipped the Nintendo Switch for a good period of time. I mean, like, once I actually finish if I finish Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, my Nintendo Switch, if I ever get one, will most likely be sitting on my bookshelf and collecting dust until another big game comes out. There's not a whole lot of games right now for the Nintendo Switch, and I'm seriously hoping that Nintendo keeps collaborating with other third-party developers so that they can they can include way more games on there, because Nintendo is not known for having many original titles. They have really big established titles like Legend of Zelda, Mario, Metroid, Donkey Kong, but they don't have a lot of new games to bring in, not many new AAAs. So maybe we'll see Nintendo impress us at some point in 2017, because right now Nintendo is trying really hard to get back to where they were originally, back when they came out with the Wii, with the original Wii console. They did really well during that year, but then they came out with the Wii U, which was very disappointing. And the 3DS, the Nintendo 3DS was way more popular at a certain point, right? The Nintendo DS did exceedingly well on the first couple months, the first half of its release. The Nintendo DS was extremely popular, and then they came out with the 3DS, which had the 3D capability, the 3D gimmick, which was pretty cool, but again, it wasn't used by many people, and eventually people just turned it off. But it still had a good lineup of games, and the 3DS had way many games than the Wii U had in comparison. So to hear that a home console has less games than the handheld Nintendo device is a bit laughable, to be honest. So hopefully the Nintendo Switch will turn around the game and bring back Nintendo on the same level of competition as PlayStation and Microsoft. So yeah, those were all of my thoughts as far as the Nintendo Switch goes. I am looking forward to it. I'm not cheering for its demise, but I definitely want to play the games on there, and I finally want to own a Nintendo home console, and I can't wait to do it with the Nintendo Switch. Thank you all for tuning in on this SoundCloud audio blog. I know this was a little bit long, but I appreciate your time on here, and make sure to tune in for another possible audio blog. Follow this page if you must. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter over at twitter.com/IcyVolk if you want to keep up with my ramblings, my opinions on the games industry. You can always visit my blog website over at vectorvolkblog.wordpress.com for video game articles and pieces, opinion pieces and all of that good stuff. And you can also watch me on Twitch over at twitch.tv/IcyShards for live commentary and for my weekly gaming talk show, Morning Poop Juice, which is a weekly roundup of game news that we do every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So make sure to tune in over there for some good live content. But as always, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Let me know what you think of the Nintendo Switch. Maybe leave a comment on the audio blog itself or on my Discord server if you wish. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a good one. Signing off, your host, Icy.